Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today are Joel Elston and Sam Page.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
The word for the day is Nutella. Why is Nutella the word for the day? I have no idea, but we're going to find out really fast. Joel, you got to tell me before Sam's going to do a little performing for us for a minute, but you got to you got to break this suspense here. Why are we talking about Nutella?
Nutella is, first of all, I literally believe it's food from heaven. It is the ultimate. It's just, there's nothing better. And there's really nothing worse for you all simultaneously at the same time. So I do not have the ability to have 1 tablespoon of Nutella. My neighbor for my birthday gave me some Nutella, and it sat on my table, and I looked at it for about a week, and I just knew that day would come, and it did. And I literally ate all 1,800 calories of that jar of Nutella in one sitting. So, yes,
so that's
yes.
an all or nothing sort of type of thing.
Yes, when you know me a little better, Sam, that's all or nothing for me. I'm all in or all out. So the once we establish Nutella, at least in my taste bud, as just it's the benchmark for heaven. You know what I mean? It's it taste wise. So I can't describe how much I like Nutella. Now, when I think of Nutella, I have my brain responds as I'm thinking about Nutella. I can taste Nutella. It is conditioned. It's built in. It's a conditioned response because I've just used that when I first discovered it several years ago. I know what it tastes like. I know what it feels like. And if I really want to think about it, I know what the next day will feel like too. But it's just, that's not the point. It's just the original feeling is amazing. And that is stored subconsciously. The process that allows Nutella and all the other cravings to take place is, we're conditioned to do that subconsciously, but the programming of things is called neuroplasticity. The brain has the ability is neuroplastic. It adapts. So it learns new things, good or bad. A neuroplastic brain can learn to be anxious as it can learn to be happy. It can learn to respond in a bunch of different ways. So one of the big words in neuroscience today is neuroplasticity, talking about the brain's ability to develop new pathways and new connections and learn new things. And children, their brain is neuroplastic on fire. It's just no matter what you program in, it's not unusual for kids with two different parents who speak 2 different languages speak perfectly in each language without any real effort. They can separate it. They learn it. It doesn't ever seem weird to them. If you were to take a 40-year-old man or woman and have them do the same thing, the process, they could do it, but the process is so much more difficult. And often when you do it later in life, you can never get rid of your accent. When you're doing it as a child, you have the accent matching the appropriate language. So the brain, as it ages, loses neuroplasticity. And it's really important to understand it doesn't totally go away, but the ability to be neuroplastic and learn, old dogs do tricks. You've heard that statement. Older people have a harder time learning than younger people. And again, there is science behind it. But the good news is there is pathways to still learning. My dear friend and mentor, his name was Dr. Sherman Master. He's passed away a few years ago. He had to learn to type at age 80 for the first time. He learned to type.
Wow.
And now, he wasn't lightning fast typist. I'm not claiming that, but he became very good at typing, and he was able to do it. He did some work for the VA, and he was required to put it in his own notes. And him and I talked about the process of him doing it. And even at 80, he said he could feel his brain. He said it was actually good for his brain. He felt he had to learn it. At first, it was very hard, but then it became easier. So the need to do it made him do it. And then the repetitive nature of it allowed his brain to adapt to typing. And a man of 80 years of age who always had somebody else to type for him or he wrote stuff. So it is doable. And why it matters is the law of attraction responds to what we're thinking and feeling. Well, neuroplasticity it responds to different things too. So we become conditioned to feel certain ways. I've thrown into the topic today, I use the word failure. Well, failure to most people is an absolute, failure is not an option, or failure is, you will not fail. Well, actually, if you're going to learn, failure is the fastest way to learn. I work with a gymnast. She is 14 and she's like professional. I mean, she's one of these kids that's probably going to the Olympics in a couple of years.
Wow.
And she's brilliant. And we were talking about this concept. She said 98% of her training is failing. To be perfect, I have to fail till I'm not. And so she pushes herself. To get a perfect score, you have to fail 98% of the time is her estimation before you can do that. And the brain learns better after failure. So failure instructs. The brain is more open. When you mess something up and you fail at it, the brain has much more capacity for neuroplasticity. Unfortunately, for a lot of people, failure is such a negative thing, they quit. So the opportunity, the neuroplastic event becomes, instead of I'm going to try to get better, that's a bad thing. I'm no good at that. So you programmed your brain by a neuroplastic event of the opposite response. So realizing you can control the direction of neuroplasticity, you can, when you have a failure, Carol Dweck's growth mindset, I've talked about several times on our shows, is sort of that concept when there's two groups of people, and there's more than two groups of people, obviously, but in response to failure, there's two groups of people. There are people who are defeated by the event, and there are people that are driven by the event. And the ones that are driven by the event are growth mindset people. The ones that are defeated by the old term was victim mindset, but they didn't like that, so they changed it to fixed mindset. But you can imagine I still use victim mindset. But we get into that process. Neuroplasticity programs the brain, and in either direction. It isn't just always good to have neuroplasticity if you're not programming it the right way. Anxiety, when you develop anxiety and you get stuck on the concept of anxiety, you're programming the neuroplasticity programs it to a negative event. So the sympathetic nervous system responds with a panic attack or whatever your anxiety looks like. Or if you understand anxiety can be a positive that we talked about last week, your perspective of anxiety, learn to breathe through it, take action. Action is the most incredible response to anxiety because that gives some movement to it, because of a fight or flight mechanism that sort of comes in with anxiety. So you either fight or flee. You don't just sit there and rot. So the brain programming process, and as I said, I love Nutella, and I can imagine just the process that has programmed my brain to love Nutella with all this. It is the ultimate food, knowing that I would be dead if I had Nutella every day. I would literally, I'm in perfect health. I would ruin my health in a week with Nutella. So it's a very occasional treat. And my very kind neighbor who brought me the Nutella, I was like, really, you Nutella? I mean, it's like, and she didn't bring a tiny jar. She brought a gigantic jar.
Of course.
Yes.
You're a big guy.
Yeah. Well, I am. And I also, but I do also give on her birthday a lot of calorie food too. So it trades out.
Okay. So there's a thing going on here. Okay.
Yeah. So, but within all of this, understanding, how I apply this, I'm always looking for the science of the law of attraction. So once this neuroplastic effect takes place in the brain and all this programming takes place, now you are responding on how this neuroplasticity has allowed your brain to be programmed. So that's the energy you're putting out. So that's what the law of attraction, as we know, is attracting. So if events are scary to you, they're going to be scary to you. Or if you're successful, you're successful. Or whatever the programming is, the matching energy is what you're getting to. So it all ties together. And learning to control this process and the sort of the aspect of how we're doing it, as you can imagine, is just super exciting to me. And that the more we find out about this, the connection and the explanation of how the law of attraction works, the better we can become at using it on our behalf. We're always using the law of attraction. It's just not always on our behalf.
Okay, so starting with this as an introduction, Sam, we're going to bring you in next because you've been preparing something for us. You're obviously, I mean, you're a pianist, as most of our listeners know, and you've been preparing something improvisational for us. But I'm going to throw a bit of a curveball your way.
Okay, let's do it.
And the curveball is, well, I mean, I've never really explored any of this kind of thing with you in terms of, where your range is. Because, I mean, the range I've seen so far or heard so far, I've loved. I said, well, why should I mess with that? I mean, it's perfect. We'll just let it go the way it is. But in the light of what Joel was just telling us, he was basically showing us, the light side and the dark side of Nutella, or really of anything else, right? So, I don't know. Is it possible for you to improvise something based on the concept of Nutella?
I believe I can, and I believe I will.
Well, then here it is. The Nutella Improv by Sam Page.
Yes, an ode to Nutella. Let's see.
How do you do on the Nutella theme there, Joel? What do you think?
You did really good. I mean, I really feel I tasted the Nutella as you played it. It was excellent.
There you go. What more can I ask?
We could have talked about the negative next day side effects for Nutella you could have included, but we're going to leave that out. So,
That'll be the next one.
yeah.
Sam's music is very joyful, so that may be a little bit too much to ask him to stretch to.
I'm glad we leave that. Those aren't good memories.
Yeah.
So that's good.
I have to admit, when I first saw what you'd sent to me before, when we were preparing for today's episode, and I saw Nutella on there, I said, okay, there's got to be a reason for this. Why would we want to talk about this thing? And you explained it beautifully. In fact, it's a topic we've talked about before years ago when you and I were doing this show on a regular basis. We talked about failure. We talked about missing the mark and basically dealing with the challenges that are associated with it. And I have to tell you, the stuff that we talked about then became so foundational, Joel, that as you were you had to leave the show at one point because your schedule was getting too crazy, and I was bringing other co-hosts in, and the topic kind of expanded to the point where we pretty much now, all the people who have been on the show pretty much agree, not only is failure important, but it's something that we can appreciate on a high level and feel good about.
Yes.
And actually celebrate.
Absolutely.
Yes, it's incredible. Go ahead, Sam.
I was going to say, I think it's almost necessary for a more expansive life experience, because if you're just only experiencing success and such, there's not much expansion in that, and you can learn a lot from one's failures on multiple levels of consciousness, I believe.
Completely agree. And that, when I work with, I use different terms, but the mindset that I try to instill in particularly younger clients or even younger kids that I just know is the failure, getting them to change their perspective of failure. My son, Justin, we've talked a lot about this. He would get very frustrated on whatever he tried and just quit. And I was trying to explain to him the failure is frustrating, but it instructs. The brain is open to be programmed better after you fail. And the more he accepted that concept, the bit better he became at doing different things at school. He really was able to bring his grades up, but he would get really frustrated with like a geometry problem and just say, I can't do it. I just can't do it. And, you know, and then he would literally not, he had convinced himself he can't do geometry until you didn't get it and you failed in the method you tried, but we need to find out a way around it, and eventually became very good at geometry by applying that same strategy. So it applies to kids, it applies to adults, but we have a societal, you know, there's almost a fear of failure. People don't want to do things because I don't want to appear to fail. I don't want people to see me fail. So I'd rather not ever try than to fail. And I'm the guy that, let's just put it out there. If I fall flat on my face, I fall flat on my face. It's just, that's part of the process. I have no problem with people seeing me struggle and even fail. I'll do things, you know, I'll jump first. You know, it's like, yeah, I'll do that. And it might not work. I had an idea earlier today. You know, we're looking at a big trip this year, and I was thinking about Justin and I are going to go to Hawaii and maybe Maui. And I was looking at this place online, and I thought, what if I had an event in Maui? What if I had an event in Maui that I want to put, first of all, for tax reasons, that would be a really smart move. My trip would be
why not?
Yeah. So I'm going to do it no matter what. But the idea that I'm going to have an event, I'll advertise it in Hawaii and I'll advertise on the West Coast. I'll advertise it everywhere. And you know, I don't know if one person shows up, but I'll do it. I'll have a live feed as well. And I will do it from Hawaii. Now, I could look like an idiot and have it a venue with one person or have Justin sitting in there waving at me. I could do that. Or I could go do the experience of doing it, put it out there, and I might have 20 people show up. I might have a huge live stream. It's all irrelevant. The fear of failing is irrelevant here. It's the process of doing it. And so I don't mind putting myself out there because I understand the value of failure. I joke every day that I go to the gym every day with the goal of failing. If I don't fail in the gym, I didn't work hard enough.
There's an odd side effect of failure as well, which is that when we give in to our fear about failing, we basically don't put ourselves into the position of failing. I mean, that's what we're trying to avoid. So we take ourselves out of it. When we go through enough failures, we end up with an unexpected result, which is we don't care as much. After a while, you fail enough times. The first few times it's horrendous. The next 25 times it's really unpleasant. The next 35 times, or you know, whatever it is, it just gets less and less until finally it's like, oh, who cares? You just don't care after a while because it's almost like you've been conditioned to. I've experienced this before. This is nothing new. I know what this is like. Don't like it so much, but I can deal with this.
There's a book called Rejection Proof. I don't know if you read Rejection Proof, Sam. It is. I highly recommend it. It's a book that I won't go into long detail, but this guy, he was terrible at his sales job. So somebody told him you got to desensitize yourself to rejection. So he went out and intentionally asked ridiculous things of people like, can I borrow $100? Can you make me a special pizza, for free? Or can I get refills on my steak at a restaurant? Just crazy stuff with the intent of being rejected. And what he found was his goal was to be but what he started getting shocked at is the times, even the most ridiculous thing, people would go, well, I can't do that, but why? You know, or, you know, and it started conversation. So he went into a Krispy Kreme donut in Texas, and this was during the Olympics. He went into Krispy Kreme donut in the middle of the rush hour morning. And he said, is there a way that you can make me donuts colored in the Olympic rings? and, you know, expecting in the middle of rush hour, the manager to go, please just get out of here or something, you know? And if you've been in a Krispy Kreme donut at 9 a.m, it is not the place to expect that attention. So the manager she said, give me just a second. So she drew one up. She literally created the Olympic rings, colored them the right way, and gave them to him for free.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
And so he interviewed her going, well, I came here for you to tell me no. Why did you tell me yes? And she said, I am open to the universe's suggestion. And that is the most bizarre suggestion I've had all day. And I thought, let's see where this goes. They became very good friends. first of all, he developed a best-selling book, and he has a great blog and podcast, I believe. And she actually became sort of famous in the book and got a lot of attention. I think she got promoted within Krispy Kreme really high because of that attention that was brought to that. So the rejection, and when you desensitize to it, people that are scared, when you're scared to take that leap. When I left my company, the treatment center that I was working at in 2013, when I was exited from that company, and I had nowhere to, I had plenty of money. It wasn't a money problem, but I didn't know what I was going to do. And the safe thing was to go get another job directing another treatment center. I had multiple offers for that. But the impossible thing is opening a private practice, because in 2013, life coaching was not the industry it is today.
No,
there was nobody life coaching. Nobody even really knew what that meant. And when I did that, I took that leap knowing the safe route is not what I want to do. I want to go something new. Like I said, I was planning on going a year without making any money. I was prepared to handle that. Within 2 weeks, I was full basically, and I never stopped being full. So it ended up being far more lucrative, far better. I love my job so much more, opened many more streams of revenue. I would never go back. I'm so grateful that event happened, but the fear could have kept me stuck in that cycle. There's people that get stuck because I can't, that comfort zone keeps me safe, but they're never going to reach their potential because of the fear of that.
That's a phrase that comes up a lot here on the show, that comfort zone. It's a comfort zone or a safety zone. And the thing that strikes me, and I've mentioned this a number of times, particularly the first part, it strikes me that neither one is true. It's not comfortable and it's not safe.
It is a bit ironic, isn't it?
I mean, it's just crazy. But I mean, I get why people describe it that way, but there's the reason they call it comfortable is because it's so familiar. So, there's a certain comfort in that. And what is also most familiar is often, from many people's perspective, the safest thing in their lives. And yet there are people for whom the safest thing in their lives is actually not all that safe because they don't live in safe environments. And they still feel that it's safe. It's one of those mind-boggling things.
Well, there is a scientific explanation. It's called homeostasis. The body seeks no change. If you're breathing and you're alive, let's stay with that. Let's stay there. You're in a safe environment, at least safe enough that you're breathing. And the body's always protective. It doesn't want change. You're pre-programmed against change. Being uncomfortable within change, it breaks homeostasis. And the idea that your body's number one response is to stay alive. It's not your happiness. It's not your well-being. It's to stay alive. There's a part of your body that's its sole focus. So I deal with people all the time that they're stuck at home, or they have a severe weight problem, and they've gotten into this rhythm of what serves them. Now, nobody by any definition would think of severe alcoholic, watching him drink or her drink every day and having these crazy episodes. That is a horrible way to live, but that's become their perception of a safety zone. That's how they deal with life. It's not safe. It's not comfortable. It's going to kill you. But yet they program that even that horrible event, those events, into somehow being comfortable. So we can become comfortable in the worst environments. When I've gone out on social services calls years ago, I'm not cut out for that work, by the way. When going into homes that the children have been abused, they send out someone with the police. And kids that are living in the absolute, I can't talk about it in detail because I get too emotional, but kids that are living in the worst abusive situations, I won't describe them.
Sure.
They're scared to walk out that door, because no matter how bad of they're being tortured, or they're being neglected, or they're being beaten, or whatever they got going on, that known is to them safer than the back seat of that car, because he or she doesn't know where they're going. Mm-hmm. And that's very sad to watch happen, because because the end of the day, that child's leaving, and it's very seldom is that child leaving without claw marks in the back of their abuser trying to hold on to them, getting out the door.
It's mind-boggling, but it's also understandable at the same time.
Sure. Yeah. And the positive on that, I hate to tell that story because it's so negative, but the positive is when you go visit them a week later, they're different children. They've been fed, they're safe, they're happy, they're smiling. So it is getting them out of that. They would never go back when they have seen the other side. It's the fear of the unknown that keeps us stuck often.
And that's the neuroplasticity that allows them to change so quickly once they're out.
Exactly. Yes, that's the reinforcement. The neuroplasticity says, wait a minute, these people are feeding me. This person's not raping me. This person's not beating me. This is pretty good. I thought I had to put up with the other stuff. This is a lot better.
Yeah. We have two different themes going on here, and they seem on the surface to be different themes, but I'm going to suggest the idea that they're two ways of saying the same thing. On the one hand, we have the theme of people being afraid of failing, of even taking the risk of failing. On the other hand, we have the people who are afraid of a change because the change is an unknown to them. And those are really two sides of the same coin, but they seem different, don't they? Why do they seem so different?
Sam, you got an idea on that?
I think there's specificity, but also, okay, so there's the fear of failure, but then also the fear of change. Because I think the fear of failure comes from kind of leaving your comforts, or hold on. I don't know. I do know, but I don't know. Like the fear of failure is kind of like fear of trying something new because you're afraid of that. Whereas the fear of leaving your comfort zone is like, or that change, you're leaving something familiar for something that might benefit you, but it's still like a change. So it's unfamiliar.
And I like where you're going with that, because the fear of failure is a lot of times societal based, it's expectation based. It's, I am, the embarrassment of failing is too much. My ego is going to be damaged by me failing. So I'd rather not try. I don't want people to see me fail. I went early in my recovery from addiction. I was very embarrassed, and rightfully so at the time, for all the stuff I'd done. And I was very embarrassed to be seen in public. So I was waiting tables early in my recovery at a little restaurant about 70 miles from where I grew up. But it was on the beach. And so a lot of families I knew would go to that restaurant. My biggest fear for the first 6 months I worked there is I would walk up to that table and I would see somebody I grew up with, and they would see me as a waiter. I was an insurance executive, and I was afraid that people were going to see me as a waiter. Now, first of all, I was doing nothing wrong. I was making good money, but it took me a long time before I was fearful that people would see me in a different way than I wanted. I would be considered a failure. You left your dad's insurance agency, you went to jail, you're now waiting tables. What a failure. And now I was so scared of people knowing that. Clearly that fear of people knowing that went away. I literally wrote a book and did that and put my booking photo on the back of the book. So I totally revisit that right now, but that process was really clear. So the fear of failure, it's often the fear of being seen failing as much as anything else. I don't want people to laugh at me. I don't want people to belittle me. So I'm going to stay comfortable where I'm at. Where, the fear of leaving a comfort zone is more security based. It's more the idea that the perception that the known is always going to be much safer than the unknown, which is, you never go further. The idea that if we all just stayed put and we never left that, 5-mile radius of where we lived and did the same thing, it would be a really boring place. The fact that we get shipped all over the place, we move all over the place, different experiences, us three, we've never actually met in person. I've never met Walt in person. We've been friends for a long time, but clearly different backgrounds, different everything, but yet somehow we're all here. That's an incredible thing by taking change, by taking action, by appearing on a podcast. It's just something different, but there is a process that our body, and a lot of it gets reinforced again societally, but there's a belief system that you can reprogram that the failure is good, change is good. Nothing ever happens positive without change. It might even be a negative change to start, but change requires change. You can't say, I want something, but I'm not willing to change anything to get it. It doesn't work that way.
Also, the story that you told, I love the story about how you had been an insurance executive, you'd had the fall from grace, and now you're being a waiter, and you're not feeling good about that. You're afraid someone's going to see you, la la la. When you talked about that, a thought came to my head. And the thought was, you're afraid to be seen. You don't feel good about that situation. The two are really going together. You don't feel good about it. So therefore you don't feel good about the situation. And if I can draw a sort of a conclusion from it, therefore you don't feel good about yourself in that situation.
Yes.
And that's really important, because what we're really talking about at that point is self-esteem.
And you nailed it. And as time went on and I started building my recovery, I started doing the work, I started doing everything, I got to a point I could care less. It was laughable that was ever a thing. And of course, my position right now, I'm so grateful for that experience. It was necessary. I have no problem now in any capacity of talking about that time in my life. My perception then, my self-worth was based on what I did for a living. I had nothing else in my mind. So while waiting tables, when there was no fear of that, there's really nothing wrong with waiting tables. It's not a great job, but people pay you money to bring them food. It's just not rocket science. It's not a lot of, it's easy. But my perception of it, because it was so far less than I thought I was supposed to be doing, that it destroyed my self-esteem, which did not allow me to believe that I also was a newly convicted felon back in the day. So there's not a lot of people lining up to hire that.
Right.
Especially somebody that used to work with kids at that point. So not a lot of, hey, oh, great, come on in. Let's start it. Doesn't work that way.
No, not really.
Yeah. Thank God. But this all was a necessary training ground. I don't have the life I have today without that total fall from grace and total failure. I lost it all. There was the ultimate point in my life. There's just nothing else to lose. And that is the freest moment of my life. And that began everything.
This is a very interesting conversation on a number of different levels and for a number of different reasons to me. Among other things, Joel, I'm thinking back to the days when you and I were doing these shows, and we talked a lot about not only this kind of a situation, but also about your treatise, basically. In fact, you're writing a book on it, sort of ongoing writing process, but you're still writing the book on the importance.
Okay, I get a wall. I get it. Thank you.
No, I'm just trying to point us to the right book, because you have a few books, so.
Yeah.
But this is the book about the importance of taking action.
Yes.
And how valuable that is. And by the way, there have been other people who joined me on the show as guests who also take the position that the most important thing you can do is to take action. And I've always been fascinated, as you know, because we talked about this stuff a lot. I've always been fascinated by the action piece as opposed to the lack of confidence piece or the self-esteem piece, depending on how you want to look at it. And I know that part of your premise is that, well, when you take action, that's a way of building self-esteem, because the more action that you take, the better you feel about yourself.
Yes.
There's also that flip side, though. The flip side is if you take actions that are scaring you into staying in that comfort safety zone, it's actually working against you. And that makes for a very interesting inflection point.
Sure.
Because you can go either way with it. And in fact, that's part of where you spend a lot of time with the work that you do with your clients, helping them get on the right side of that inflection point.
Right. Well, the analogy, and I'll address what you're saying, but I start with, one of the analogies of action is, I believe we have this, the law of attraction provides an internal GPS.
Mm-hmm.
It is just like Waze app. You get in your car and Waze app will tell, you can give me your address, Walt, and I can leave and I'll be there tomorrow morning. It'll get me exactly there. Even if I head the wrong way to start, the Waze app is going to say, hey, Joel, turn around and head to Walt. You're going the wrong way. It'll do that no matter how many wrong turns I make. The wrong turns are irrelevant. It will always correct me. You agree with that, right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, the trip may be a little bit longer, but you're going to get there one way or another.
I'll get there. The only time that the Waze app is totally useless is if you just sit there. It doesn't know what to do. Okay.
Or turn it off,
movement,
which is basically the same thing.
Yeah. But as far if the thing's on, if it's on, it can't do anything until you move, even the wrong move. So I have seen in all these years of doing this, why I stress action is any action. It sounds so silly. Sometimes it's washing the dishes if you haven't moved in 3 days. Sometimes it's taking out the garbage. Sometimes it's cleaning the corner of your room. Sometimes it's just going to the grocery store. Any kind of action to develop this neuroplasticity toward action. And I like to start with simple things, so there is a very low threshold of no perception of failure in the beginning. Just some action. And there's multiple stories that I share in law of action. I share a lot of these of people who set out on one mission that ended up on an entirely different mission that was far greater than they ever intended. But the action is what got them to the place for that.
Oops. You got a freeze?
Hmm.
Is he frozen at your end too?
He is, yeah. I trust him. Oh, I think
okay.
Here he is.
Here he is. He's back. Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, I guess my phone's saying shut up and listen for a second. I'm not sure if it's something or not.
Well, no, you were making a valuable point and a good one. You were describing how, when you're working with a client, you're trying to help somebody that that taking of action basically helps to program a result that they weren't expecting. And that's kind of where you got cut off at that point.
Yes. And because a lot of people have an anticipation of I'm destined to fail or I'm a screw up or whatever that internal dialogue is. And so as we know, that's what they're putting out there. So they anticipate failure, so they'll get the failure. When you can get them to get any kind of, like last week I had a client who has been paralyzed for 6 months. I met with him for the first time. I challenged him to complete one online application before he met with me again. That's it. Just complete one. Not even get the job. So he texted me 2 days after our appointment and said, he took a picture of it. He mailed it to me. He said, I completed the application. I said, excellent work. Really good. So I wouldn't expect any more than that, just to compliment him for doing that. Well, 2 days later, the company called and said, we'd like to interview you. And I wasn't even expecting that. I was just expecting the completion of the application. Right. So he asked to have a session. He said, I'm a terrible interviewer. And I go, well, yeah, you are, not because you are, but you just said you are, so you're going to be. and he has a big gap in his history of work, and he was worried about this thing. So he came in that day and we did a mock interview, and we filled in some blanks with some creative ideas of how he can say all that stuff. And he ends up getting the job. One action changed everything. He's like, my life changed by one action. Now that's a draft. Usually it doesn't happen that way, but just the process of filling out the application is what I was going to build on. But before our scheduled next session, he was able to obtain the job and started working, which is a catalyst to his mental health. And his job, it requires a lot of walking. And he texted me the other day, I've lost 8 pounds in a week, which is one of the issues we're dealing with. So he feels good. His self-esteem's up. There's this girl talking to him at work. He hadn't had a girl talk to him, and he said 5 years. It's just nothing big. They're just talking. But so he has a whole different demeanor to him. It started with one action. So yes, there could be some, not every action is good, but if you accept that the action forward is not going to make things, if you're stuck, any action is not going to make things worse. It's just simply it's either going to be neutral or move you forward. And it's really an effective tool when you can get anyone to see the fear of why you're not taking action is the concept of why you're stuck. And it's just part of this whole process, this perception of, I'll just stay where I'm at. And as miserable as I am, being rejected or being in any of these other perceptions, it's going to be much worse. So I might as well just stay where I'm at. And if you stay where you're at, you're stuck. So action is a necessary catalyst in some form or fashion at all times.
And I certainly appreciate what you're saying there. I think there's a lot of truth to what you're saying. I'll tell you that one of the reasons I was thinking about this inflection point was because of my own story, which you know pretty well. Back when I started this podcast, I started it largely because my entire life was falling apart. My income had fallen apart with the 2008 financial crisis, and I'd never been able to really get it back again. We were going deeper and deeper in debt. And the thought that kept racking my brain as we were doing those early podcasts was, well, I was taking actions. I was taking actions every single day, and it seemed like every action that I took set me back. I went I take one step forward and 3 steps backward every single time that I took a step. So that's why I've always had a little bit of a thing about, well, action is good, but is it always good? Is it always the necessary element? Isn't there another element sometimes? Because I know that for myself, I really had to find other ways to rebuild my sense of self-love, self-esteem, self-confidence before I could trust the action piece to fulfill me, to give me that, that GPS guidance that you were talking about. And I think that was part of the reason I started the podcast, because I wanted to talk to people like yourself. You were my 12th interview. I don't remember if you remember that, but you were the 12th episode that I did of the show. And I loved what we talked about. I love the things you said, so that's why I wanted you as a co-host. But even then, I was still just struggling with a fear that had developed that I basically been doing all of my life what I've been taught to do. That is, go out, work hard, and you'll succeed. And I'd gone out and I worked hard. I built something up. It had crashed, and I kept working hard, and I kept failing worse and worse and worse and worse. And that's what actually led me to exploring the law of attraction, because I figured, well, what I was taught wasn't working. There must be something I'm missing here, something I'm not getting. And I don't quite get this law of attraction stuff. So if I bring experts in, they can explain it to me, and I can kind of understand how this whole thing works. So that became part of my story. That's why I have a thing about, I love and appreciate the value of action, but I think there's another piece that needs to come into it. And I'm still not quite sure exactly how to describe what that piece is. I'm kind of laying it out there just to see if you have any ideas about it.
I do. And in fact, in Law of Attraction, probably chapter 2 or 3, Esther says, action is actually far more powerful than thought. She contradicts that later on, but she does. Because with action, with intention. And I want to lovingly point out, the action you were taking back then was the same repetitive action you had taken before. When you started the podcast, you took a new action, which led to a new result. Mm-hmm. So I do recommend you don't take the same repetitive action over and over again and then wonder why it's not working.
Piece. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I do. That is a caveat, because I remember well, I'm going to do this. Well, isn't that sort of what you did before? And the podcast is the perfect example of starting an action that led to your exit from that redundancy. So the action was there. It was, you were only comfortable doing the action you were comfortable doing.
So if I can express that in a different way, because I'm not that there's anything wrong with the way you express it, but I just want to kind of give it a little bit of a different twist. In order to make the action piece useful, it really has to be action in a direction that you previously felt was too uncomfortable.
Yes. The one of the things that I remember, and I don't think this is anything that will upset you, and I mean that sincerely, I care deeply, but it's at one point you were going to have an event. You remember you were going to have an event, and you wanted to pre-sell the event. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you remember that. And
not really. I've done a few of those, so I'm not sure which one it was, but that's okay. It's not a big deal.
Well, and one of the things I wanted you to do is have the event. Just have the event. Just let's have it. If I need to drive up and do it with you, we might be the only ones there. It might cost $400 or $500, wherever the room was going to be. Let's have the event. Well, you put it up to pre-sale, and we got no pre-sale. So you said, no, I'm not going to do the event.
Oh, okay.
You remember? I don't know if you remember that. We talked about that.
I did not. No.
Okay. So my point was, let's just do the event. you know, you never know. I mean, no, it'll be you and me. We'll do the event and record it and have it. But yet there was this fear of nobody showing up. And I'm like, let's see what it's like to do it. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in fact, the last event that I can think of that I did, you actually did contribute to it, and I did follow through on it, and it didn't have a big turnout, and I was okay with that. So apparently I did some growing between that one that you described and this one about a year and a half ago.
Yes. And so, it's a lot of times we think we're taking action, but when you have to examine the action, if the action is only a very narrow band of action that you're doing, okay, applying for a job. It's nowadays when you apply for a job, you apply online and they get 900 applications online. What are the odds of your being seen?
Yeah, about 1 in 900.
Exactly. So what I have clients do is we get a good resume together. You apply online. You show up the next day or 2 or 3 days later, say, I applied online, go to the manager. I applied online. Here's my resume. I just wanted to make sure you got it. I'm very interested in working for your company. Do you know the success rate of doing that is wildly high?
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me, actually.
Yeah. It's you know, Justin, my son Justin, who I'm very proud of. He got his first job at a trampoline park, indoor trampoline park. I don't know, last year, year before, and he was really good. Well, they cut his hours, and he showed up at work one day, and they said, we don't need you. So I had to go. So before he called me, he walked across the street to Publix, and he introduced himself to the manager. And he said, I would really like to learn how to be a cashier. I'm really smart and I can learn. And she was so impressed with, and he shook her head very, you know, really, you know, he's small for his age. So that really had a great look to it. And she says, well, how much do you need? He was making $13 an hour at the trampoline park. He goes, I need $13.50 an hour. And, she goes, we'll accept those terms. And so he started his job, and he did that by taking the action. And he had to fill an application online afterward. But if he would have just filled it out online, the response would have, and that's the way we do it, doing something that was way out of his comfort zone. And if you called the store to say, I want to talk to the manager, they're going to say, no, just apply online.
Right. Yeah. So not only was it outside of his comfort zone, it was outside of the norm, which, by the way, is why it's so effective.
Exactly. Yeah. So having that ability to find action that is, you need to be a little uncomfortable in the action. Now, sometimes a lot of the clients I'm dealing with can be literally paralyzed in a sense where they're just stuck at home. So getting them up to do one dish, it sounds ridiculous, but one dish builds momentum. You know, when I get people to go to the gym, you know, I'm like, go to the gym for 10 minutes. I don't care if you go in, do one set and leave. Well, usually they'll do more, but getting them there is the hard part. You know, getting them there. And once they do that, a lot of people have, like the gym, for example, most females that I'm always trying to get female friends of mine to work out. It's so good for them. But most of them have this big fear that everybody's looking at them and they don't know what they're doing. Well, first of all, you got to know the gym environment. Nobody cares. Nobody. I mean, everybody is self-absorbed doing their thing. Nobody's making fun of people. I've been in the gym for 40 something years. The gym people if you need help, that anybody's going to be glad to help. It's just a different environment than what a lot has been painted. It isn't like a bunch of gym veterans are sitting around laughing at the newbies. No. We're not. We're very glad the newbies are there. I see the other day, this guy's a massive power lifter. He's been in contests, and there's this little 14-year-old that first time in the gym, he walks over, he's helping him get his bench press right. He's taking all the time to show him all the right way to do it. And, you know, and the kid was just, and here this massive muscular man taking all this time with him. And that's the gym I see. So, but a lot of people have this irrational fear they're going to make fun of me. First of all, I would never stand for anyone making fun of somebody at the gym. So, or no one I know would stand for that. So it is a much different thing, but getting people to believe that, you got to get them there the first time.
Yeah. Yeah. And really any good worthwhile activity, such as going to a gym, has people involved almost every single time. with the kind of attitude you're talking about. Now, working out is not really the same thing as what I'm about to talk about. I'm very much into dancing, and dancing is, it's an exercise, but it's really not that primarily. Primarily, it's an enjoyment thing.
Yes.
But people who go to dances for the first time have a similar fear. Like, well, they don't know how to dance. They're going to look like idiots. They're going to screw up and embarrass themselves, and they're going to want to go hide in the corner and so forth. And the last few dances I've been to, there've been actually quite a few beginners, and the people who are the more advanced dancers, we do exactly what you just described. We go out of our way to dance with them, to help them, and I make my favorite thing to say to them is, "Hey, we all started out as beginners. You're not alone in that." The only difference between you and me is I've been doing it for a while. That's it.
Yeah,
that's the only difference. Yeah, so I totally get what you're talking about.
That perception, and first of all, that I don't want to get too much of a side tangent, but dancing is exercise. I know it's very enjoyable, but it's certainly physical.
It is,
and one of the things, I don't know if we talked about this last week when we were talking about perceptions, but they interviewed a bunch of housekeepers and like in a hotel. And
I remember this story. I love this story.
Yeah, they asked about how much exercise they thought they got, and they're like, I don't exercise at all. They're working 8 hours a day doing physical exercise. Once they were reframed their brain, they became fitter because their perspective is, I am actually exercising. They didn't get any more activity. They just believed they were getting activity. So,
exactly. And there was the control group, which is another group also cleaning hotel rooms, who weren't told that, and they didn't have the same changes that this group did have.
Exactly. So it's that process of what you're believing. So, not to argue your point, because your point is on, but people that think, well, I took action and it didn't work for me. You took action that was probably very repetitive to the action that continued to fail. And you were shocked that it kept failing. Like, in an industry in 2008, I worked with this accountant guy who worked for Bank of America, and he's like, I can't get an accountant job. I've applied to 100 accountant jobs. I go, buddy, we have to step away from the accountant rule here. You are not in 2008 going to get an accountant job paying you $200,000 a year. Guarantee it, not getting it. So we need something new. You keep applying for the job you're not going to get. We need something new.
Yep, that's an important piece as well. I think also another important piece, this is where law of attraction teaching really helped me too, is recognizing that I had a tendency, you described it in terms of doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, which truly is an accurate description. But another way of looking at the same thing was I would do the same thing with a built-in belief that kept growing that every time I tried to do it, it would fail.
Yes.
So I was convinced that my next attempt was not going to work.
Completely.
And that's totally law of attraction mindset in reverse, so to speak. Basically working against myself.
Yeah, no, it's, as we always say, the law of attraction has no opinion or efficacy. That's what you're giving it. But when you take an action, I don't know why you want me to do that. I'm going to fail. Then you're going to fail. And so when you get in the mindset of taking action and your expectation is that of failure, then the expectation, the law of attraction, again, like, okay, this guy wants to fail at this, let's do it. And we'll keep doing that. You'll keep feeding yourself back on that. And it's like being in a curse and you're stuck in something that doesn't seem logical. Well, I tried really hard, but I knew it wasn't going to work anyway. Well, okay, but if it's not going to work, it's not going to work. And your belief in it, that's the outcome no matter how hard you try. The belief is what matters. So, because of what you bring with intensity, what you bring, to the energy. When you go interview for a job, if you're expecting to not get the job and you're sitting there going, the energy you're transmitting, I get offered jobs in jobs I'm not applying for. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just, like, would you run our treatment center? Would you do this? Or no, I'm not doing that. But you come in with the right energy and you get offered jobs. You come in with the wrong energy, and no matter how good they appear on paper, that permeates from you. The belief is not going to work is an energy they pick up on. It never fails.
And then to kind of flip it around to the other side of the coin, so to speak, when we do take actions that are outside of the comfort zone, when we take actions that are outside of our normal forms of behavior, what ends up happening is a number of different effects start to occur. One effect is, well, you get different results just because you're trying something different. A second effect is that the more that you take these steps, you're basically just, you're trying to build yourself. You're trying to work on yourself. That's the popular way we like to discuss it. I'm working on myself. I'm make myself a better person. In the process of doing that, we're also, to use LOA terms, we're raising our vibration. In other words, we're feeling better. We're feeling better about ourselves. We're feeling better about our situation. Maybe nothing's really happened yet, but we're just taking all these little steps to feel a little bit better and a little bit more outside the comfort zone. So didn't feel all that great to be outside, but then again, I got this other thing that happened that was kind of cool. And, we're just slowly building that vibe. And then all of a sudden something happens that really is good, really surprising. Like, whoa, where did that come from? That came out of nowhere. Well, it didn't actually come out of nowhere. You've been building it all this time, but the results showed up in a way that was out of your realm of expectation. It wasn't the way you thought it was going to happen. It came surprisingly. And that's when we're almost kind of like knocked off balance a little bit because, well, what just happened there? I don't get it.
Yeah. And you, that energy then, again, that's that little tap that reaches that, again, look at the science of it. That little thing happens you didn't expect. A little dose of dopamine hits. A new pathway is created through neuroplasticity, and the process begins.
Exactly.
And one of the things I know shared with you. One of my clients. He's been a client with me forever. He's like a good friend now. And several years ago, he was working for this big corporation, and he had a gambling problem, and he was stealing some money, and he got caught. And he was fired, and he was charged with a crime, but they reduced it down to a misdemeanor. So in the meantime, he knew he had to work. So he went to Amazon warehouse, which is a very tough job to work at. Fair, because I own Amazon stock. They're very fair, by the way. But tough. But you work hard. They run you hard. Well, he was really good at Amazon. They loved him because he had to work, and his wife was like, you better, this is your last chance. He was really motivated to do a good job. So he did fantastic at Amazon. So he was there for 6 or 7 months, and he got to the highest level you can get within the warehouse and was doing well. And there's a guy that was working alongside of him that got an interview with an insurance company and said, hey, I got hired at this insurance company. Now he was like, oh, okay. He said, well, I get a bonus if you just apply. So will you apply for me and I'll get $100 bonus and whether you take the job or not. So he applied for the insurance company, got an interview, ended up getting hired. Again, he only had a misdemeanor, which isn't a disqualifier from working in insurance. He, within 6 months, got a promotion, another promotion, another promotion. He's now the highest level he could be at, making twice as much money as he did at the original job.
Wow.
Able to work from home when he chooses. It was all a factor. The action of taking the job, the uncomfortable action of being a supervisor at a big corporation to, running around at Amazon with the opportunity led to another, and the law of attraction is fully in play there. And once he started expecting those things to happen, it just happened at a very fast rate for him.
Now, Sam, a moment ago, about 5 minutes ago, at one point, you were giving this big smile while Joel was talking. I don't know if you remember what it was you were smiling at.
I absolutely do not.
You're not, okay.
But I'm sure it was resonating with me.
Well, yeah, exactly. So I'll go at it this way. Of the stuff that we've been talking about right now, what has been resonating? What's the part that's jumping out to you as you're hearing and thinking about this? Anything that you're identifying with, or what's your thought?
I don't think there is anything that I'm not identifying with, but what's sticking out the most is the fear of failure, especially since I kind of experienced failure about half an hour ago on this. But yeah, just like it can choose to remain in that space of fear, or you can say fuck it and act anyway. And I think the latter is what's going to create any sort of change.
I love that. It's your response, failure and the fear of failure, when you realize the greatest tool you can have is the ability to overcome, bypass that fear of failure and take the action. That's where success lies. Stepping out of your comfort zone, asking for what makes you uncomfortable, standing up and, being that person. And, the group of people that I fight the hardest for, you hear me refer to often, are foster care kids. And because they're the most underrepresented people in our country. And so I fight really, really hard for them to give them a voice. And the best way I can fight for them is to teach them what we're talking about. They have been conditioned to believe they are worthless. They have nothing. They're really treated on a really low level. And I have them challenge that. And it's not always popular with the situations they're in, but of course I have their back, so nobody will mess with them. But my point is, I get them to get fired up, and it changes their life, and it changes the direction of their life. Because, if I want to hire somebody, you show me some kid that came from the foster care system and graduated high school and went on to college. I want him working for me. I want anybody that can go through that. One of the things when I look at a resume of somebody I'm going to be hired, somebody that put themselves through college and they worked at McDonald's and they did all these things, they might have C averages compared to somebody with A's. I like that person better. I like that person who fought hard and didn't give up, that had to go do it. I give great credibility to that when I'm hiring people.
Yeah. It's not going to surprise you, Joel, to discover that we've gone an hour.
Wow.
We used to talk about that all the time. Another hour has flown by.
It has.
But this has been wonderful. And Sam, thank you for the improv. Thank you for your contributions as well. Good stuff. I think you really nailed the Nutella improv this time. We'll have to add that to the next album. I love that too. And Joel, as usual, you're on point with everything. Really great stuff. So thank you guys very much. Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.